13 seconds. All right, that's officially time.
There we go.
We can start now.
We're jumping off the ledge.
I have to admit, well, one, I'm very pleased to see everybody here. Doubly, one, I'm thrilled. Damien and I are thrilled to see the crowd that we have here. Secondly, we're really thrilled to be back here to be in front of you. So thank you to everybody for coming out, participating, and making this the conference that it is. It's really a fantastic conference, and I'm just totally excited to be back. And I gotta admit, it's been 4 years since I'm standing in front of a crowd. I'm a little bit nervous, so bear with me.
Yeah,
The extra coffee's not helping.
He's not high. He's not levitating yet. So
Well, no, that's why I'm back here. You can't see. Well, and actually, the thing is, 2 cups of coffee. You go, well, that's lightweight. It's like, as I've gotten older, I got to stop my caffeine at noon. All right. So just a couple quick housekeeping things. They are videoing this, and I'm just going to apologize to the future YouTube viewers. I have a tendency to move around a little bit. I'm going to be asking for a lot of input from everybody here. So we can handle that a couple of ways. We've got the catch box, and that's great for questions and stuff, but I expect that we're going to be doing a lot of quick communication. So we're going to try to, one, be loud. Not that I think that what you say is necessarily going to get picked up, but that's going to mean that we all can hear, and myself and Damien can repeat it. So hopefully it does get recorded, so it does mean something for the people on YouTube. So that's great. All right, so we are here for Tech Onboarding. And when I came up with the idea for this session, I'm thinking either this is absolutely brilliant or I'm going to be talking to an empty room. I'm not saying it was absolutely brilliant because you haven't heard what we're doing yet, but it does seem that it is a topic that people are interested in. So thank you for coming out. And I'm very, very happy to have Damien presenting with me because Damien and I, we have a history that goes back a long time at this point. And we've had some shared experiences over the years in IT. And we thought that this would be a great opportunity to talk about those. So, Damien, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, yeah. As Ben said, he and I go back at least to 2005. We were trying to figure out the other day when we actually met, and we think it was 2005.
Yeah.
I've been in the IT space, Mac IT space, for more than 25 years. I have worked in education, small business, K-12, higher ed, and now corporate. So I've seen all of it. I've seen the entire gamut. I've seen how onboarding works. I've seen how onboarding doesn't work. When we were talking about this presentation, I said, hey, Ben, why don't you present on how to do onboarding, and I will present on how not to do onboarding. So I can tell you some stories as we go along.
So that's a good point because the concept of onboarding, so I'm a consultant. I don't work for any one company. I've never actually worked for just one company from an IT providing standpoint, but I've worked with many, many companies, many, many schools, K-12, higher ed, a whole gamut. And it is the disasters that I've seen that kind of triggered, hey, maybe this is a great conversation to have. And when you have something that's successful, it's a less interesting story when something is a disaster, but we need to talk about both, and that's what we're going to be doing here. As a consultant, I've seen the good, I've seen the bad, and actually you were mentioning we met in 2005. It's actually about the same time that I met Steve and Bill from MKA, where Damien ended up working. So Damien just kept coming back. And okay, so we're going to have a lot of stories to talk about as time goes on, but right now, what I'm really interested in, because when you're talking to an audience, you need to know who your audience is. Now, I can take a guess as to who you are, but I don't want to assume anything. So thus, who are you? Dead silence. Okay, so let's go about it this way. How many people here are in corporate IT? Okay.
About 10.
All right. How many people here are in education? So much
Okay,
bigger group.
yep.
Now, out of that group, how many are K-12? Okay.
Yep, about half.
Yeah. How many people are in higher ed? All right. Pretty close.
Okay,
Pretty
yep,
close.
about even. Yep.
How many people here are something other than those three tranches?
Oh, that's interesting. I want
Government.
to hear those.
So how many
stories.
people here are government?
Okay.
Okay. How many people here are consultants? Okay. What am I missing?
Oh, healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay, I kind of put that into corporate, but depending, it can be very different because there's a lot of different issues and concerns. Anything that we've missed? Nonprofits? Okay. So that helps us maybe direct if something
Yep.
comes up. We now know who you are. So that's helpful. Of course, I was going to make the joke, hoo, but I missed that. Got to read your presenter notes. It was a bad one anyway. Okay, I got a million jokes. They just keep going down from there. All right. Discussion. What is tech onboarding? Now, notice I have used the phrase tech onboarding because, in general, when you talk about onboarding, it's this whole piece. It's not just the technical side. There's HR. There's just a lot of pieces that are involved. So we're really going to be talking about this one piece of onboarding. So the definition that I came up with was the how to bring people and technology together to meet the goals of the organization. And while I hate reading my slide, I wanted to point that out because that sets a definition that I'm working with so you can see what that definition is. And maybe over the period of the next 69 minutes, according to the nice green screen up there, 68, God, going too slow, we might determine we might want to change that. And that's why I am in a really good position. Damien is a really good position because we do what you do and we get to talk about something and get input from all of you because we have a room filled with very big brains. We have people who have done this. We have people who are continuing to do this, people who have done it well, people that went, wow, I wish I had done this a different way. So we have this opportunity to learn from you, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to be expecting input from everybody. One of the things that I learned early on when either teaching classes or presenting, how many people here know Sean Regan? Interesting. So Sean was a trainer. Sean now works for Apple. Sean did something interesting whenever he was presenting, because we'd come to things like this, and I would listen to some presenters and be like, okay, that's good. I listened to Sean, and I realized at the end of the thing, I'd just been like enwrapped in tension. He's not that good looking of a guy that caused me to look at him. But what he did was he asked questions all the time. And he looked at people and asked the question, even if it was sort of rhetorical, but it made you connect and think. So we are going to be doing this throughout the thing because I want your input. Because I don't want to sit here and pretend that myself and Damien are the end-all be-all of tech onboarding knowledge. We have got a collection of people here that we can do some great things. Okay. Any questions to start off with? Nobody's run for the door yet. Now, if you're saying you're going to go get coffee, that's fine. Just pretend. I'll be back. I'm getting coffee. No. All right. Who here agrees with this definition? Who here disagrees with the definition? It's okay if you do, because we're going to talk about it. Does anybody have an alternative definition for technical onboarding?
I would insert the goals of the user and the organization.
Here we go. Again.
I would insert the goals of the user and the organization.
Okay. So, of course, I haven't gotten a single call today. I've just gotten 2 calls in a row, and both my phone in my pocket and my wrist started to buzz. So let me solve that problem. Okay. We are going to talk about that. And it is a very, very good point. And it's in a slide coming up. So, great. Anybody else have any input as to the definition of what tech onboarding is for you and your organization?
Has anybody ever had to come up with their own definition of onboarding? Maybe for HR? No? Okay.
Okay, all right. Moving on. So this goes back to sort of the start of it. Because you don't talk about things that are kind of, yeah, we don't need to talk about. You talk about things that need to be talked about, and usually you realize things that need to be talked about is because something happened. And yeah. We are hoping that by the end of this session, we can at least have enough of a conversation that when you go back to your organizations, you're going to be able to have a more successful onboarding process. So how many people here have a defined onboarding process?
With documentation? Okay.
Cool. How many people here are not responsible, so you don't know if you do or you don't, you're just here because you want to learn more?
Okay. A few.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I joined sessions because I want to hear more about something I may not know enough about, but maybe I've got some impact in the overall process. Maybe I'm not in charge of onboarding, but you know what? I'm managing the MDM, so I'm kind of part of it. So that makes sense. Okay. Let's talk about things that Damien and I have seen that triggered this. So, because of my role as a consultant, I am not necessarily responsible for coming up with all of the process for onboarding, but I'm usually involved with pieces of it to help out the company, and whether it's figuring out their MDM or what kind of hardware to get, stuff like that. So I contribute that way. But I have seen some things that have made me scratch my head. I have seen piles of used hardware that were never cleaned, that were never refreshed in any way in terms of an OS or management, that had the previous user's information still on it. And it was just like, here you go. Anybody here think that that is really what you want for your users? Because who are you onboarding?
It's usually brand new users.
Usually a brand new user, right? Somebody who has come in. What kind of impression does that make to that user? Has anybody else seen that? I see a couple of nods, I see a couple of no's. I am happy for the no's people, and I'm sad for the yes peoples.
When I walked into my current workplace about 2 years ago, I discovered that there was no onboarding process at all for the Macs. Zero. Absolutely nothing. There was a Word document somebody had written about 4 years earlier with some instructions in it that were, of course, no longer valid or working. And that was it. No management, no directions, no documentation. Mac users were off in the wild doing their own thing with no controls, no security, absolutely nothing. That is not how onboarding is supposed to happen.
No.
So I spent the past 2 years rebuilding that, building up an onboarding solution, building up a management solution, building up a compliance solution, so the Macs can have parity with the Windows machines.
That's a good point. How many people here see a difference between platforms and the process used to distribute them? Is that right? No.
No.
Now, I mean, I guess if you're not having auditors looking in on what you're doing, maybe you can get away with it, and maybe some of because what usually happens in the Mac world is, here you go, you're an admin, go have fun, don't talk to us. You know? And, but that's not supportable, and we can certainly give Mac users a great experience now. Now, speaking about great experiences, one of the things that I saw, which really opened my eyes to what tech onboarding can be from a positive experience standpoint. So one of my customers is a major fashion and fragrance house. And when they hand out the new hardware to their users, it comes in what is basically the same bag that if you had gone to one of their retail stores and you just bought your $1,000 worth of fragrance, they basically get their computer in that. And it is a standardized stack of hardware. They get, you know, their laptop, they get an extra charger to get some cables, some adapters, all that kind of stuff. And it's a standardized group of hardware that is presented to them like a gift. And if I'm coming in to work for them, and this is what shows up on my desk, and usually somebody comes along to, you know, show them what they got, that is a really, really pleasant experience. And that was one of the things that from a positive side made me go, they're onto something here. It's not just literally a pile of stuff on somebody's desk. They went through that extra step of just putting it in a bag. It was very simple, and actually it helps the IT people probably more than the users themselves, because you're able, because I've been involved with that process where we've had, you know, dozens of these bags, and it's good. You just go along, you know, charger, 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 and you can look in and go, yep, it's in there. So it's a win-win on both sides. So these are things we're going to talk about.
So most of us have walked into an Apple store and purchased something, right? Most of us. And I've always marveled at how much money Apple spends on their bags. You know, they don't have to give you a premium bag. They can give you a cheaper, less expensive bag, but they don't, because Apple wants a premium experience. And I think that what Ben is saying is if we can mimic that in our environments,
Yep.
at some cost, you end up having a much better, more pleasant onboarding experience. It's more welcoming. You know, welcome to the company.
Yeah.
We're pleased to see you here.
But even if you're a K-12 school with practically no budget, you can come up with a way of just making it a pleasant experience for the user. It's another checkbox on the nice column. So, okay.
Think they do that at Fendi or Gucci, or?
Well, you know, if you've got good donors, maybe you can. All right. So starting to get a little bit more into the nuts and bolts here. So basically 2 approaches. Now, you can have a whole range, you know, nothing's black and white, you know, everything is shades of gray. You know, it's or grayscale, I should say, for those of us who were in the publishing world. We want a methodical approach. That's what you want. You don't want to have any surprises. You want to know exactly what needs to be done. That needs to be documented, repeatable, but changeable as things move forward, because processes change, hardware change, responsibilities and requirements change. But what is bad is your stuff's over there, go get it. Nobody wants to be treated that way. And I've seen it done both ways. And apparently, so have you. So I was just about to ask a question for responsibility.
Does anybody have a story about the second one here?
Let's
A story they can share about tossing
I
computer
know
at the
you
user.
have it.
I'm sure somebody has a story.
Now, you don't have to give up exactly who it was. We'll have some anonymity here. But listen, we're not moving forward until somebody has a story.
No.
All right.
Okay,
There we go.
Catchbox.
I worked with a guy, and this isn't one of those I know a guy, but I'm the guy stories. This was actually another guy I worked with. Went to an executive's office to give him his new computer. The guy wasn't there, so he left the desktop computer in the hallway at his door. Now, that's the first part that's not great. So naturally, the user called and said, hey, can you come help me with this? So then this individual went back. This was a while back. Didn't realize the guy's previous computer was an IDE drive. Jammed it into the dock of his SATA dock. Started a fire in the guy's office, and then said, I don't think we can get your data. I'll see you later.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
wow.
And it wasn't exactly a new hire, but the individual that he was working with was there for a couple of weeks, and we just didn't have his new computer ready, so he was working off this old one. And then when he did get a new one, the little data that he did have was literally gone in smoke.
So this sounds like this was an executive.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah,
a
it was
cr-
higher
that is a-
education, brand new department head to the university.
you know, we call that in the corporate world, we call that a career limiting move.
Yes.
Yeah. No repercussions though. He still works there.
Okay.
Wow. I mean, I didn't think that fire was ever going to be a discussion. Note to self: add fire next time. That's wow. Okay.
Thank you
Anybody
for sharing
else?
that. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
for
that's
that.
thank you. All right, so let's start getting more into the nuts and bolts here.
Okay.
So for those of you who are directly responsible or have a piece of the responsibility for the onboarding, and for this, I'll expand it just not to tech stuff, but the entire range. So sort of HR stuff and whatever. How many people here have some input on this?
Okay.
So good, a lot of you. How many of you have a defined checklist?
And
That
how many-
is
and-
wonderful.
And how many of you are actually the primary person responsible for that checklist? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
I saw something in the back that when I asked a question, I got a little bit of a this. How many people would really be a little bit of a this? Okay.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because very few of us work in a vacuum. You know, very few of us we're just the one person. I mean, I know it exists, particularly sometimes in K-12. You know, you're like the one person responsible for everything under the sun. But usually we are working with a group. And this is why checklists are so important, because if you have distributed responsibilities, you need to be able to track the who's and the what's. As a matter of fact, this past weekend I was at an event, and I was doing a new job that I had never done before. And the person who was in charge of the group of people did something that when I looked at it, I just thought this makes total sense. And what it was a spreadsheet with each of the jobs split out with the group responsibilities, and then even within the groups, who those people were. And I looked at it and I just went, okay, that makes sense. But apparently, in the history of this organization, which is, I don't know, almost 20 years, nobody had ever done that before. And I'm like, how did they survive 20 years not doing that? So it's the same thing with the Tech Onboarding. So if you have a checklist, where did it come from? You made it. How many people here made their own checklists? Great. How many people here have used a checklist provided by a vendor? Huh, interesting. Because
That was 0, by the way.
yeah, that was I didn't see not even a when I was doing the research for this, just for grins, I went to a browser, typed in IT onboarding checklist. I went click, and pages and pages and pages of vendors. Now a lot of them were HR consultancies or HR software providers. And almost all of them provided some type of checklist. Some were better than others. Some were, give me your name and your email, we'll have somebody come talk to you, so they weren't exposed. But there was still plenty out there that even if you don't have time maybe to start your own from scratch, you can start with something. Just kind of ease the process for you. And even if you have your own checklist, maybe worth it to go take a look at some of these to see how it matches up. Did I miss anything? Did I maybe not consider something? Or, yeah, I did a great job, mine's better than theirs. In which case, sell your services to that company. Not kidding. You know, that's how these things work.
Right?
And does anybody here, yeah, Bill.
Catch box. No, I'll come around.
So just to explain what just happened there, since Damien used to work for Bill,
There you go.
you may have noticed a bit of a wind-up.
No, I think one of the things that's interesting about checklists, and for us, just a background, we're K-12 independent day school. We've got probably about, between everything we've got out there, 1,800 deployed devices. We flip these every 3 years, but every year we're doing all the new students, all the new faculty, all of these things. Our checklists aren't just the IT checklist, though. You know what I mean? Like all the things we need to get them on. Often there's a lot of domain creep in from other areas. So there's like, all right, well, what do they need to do then to log into the learning management system? What do they need to log into their student information systems? All of those things that are outside of what we generally do. So I think it's interesting when you think about checklists, you know, what are you covering and what are the expectations for what you should be covering?
Right.
And then how does that work? So I didn't raise my hand for is the checklist our own, because it isn't, because it comes in a lot of different areas. So I think that's one thing to be mindful of, is understanding domain creep, you know, from those different areas, and then what you're actually being asked to do. One of the things also that throws us off, I was going to answer one of the bad examples earlier, was we run into problems where we've got everything set, and then we've got like the dates everyone was hired and when they're expected, and then they show up 2 weeks early. You know what I mean? Or, you know, they're like, oh, we're doing, you know, by the way, next week we got PD, and this person who wasn't supposed to start until the new Teacher Institute is now coming in because we've got them. Can you get all of those things set up for us? So it's a bad experience a lot of the times, because we're under the gun because people weren't as forthcoming with all the information that they needed. So it's not we're throwing it at them, but we're throwing it at them, and they're not getting the full onboarding experience because it's not some of the people, like if you were trying to get us right now, the majority of my staff, we're out right now. We're here. This is our one thing. So when stuff has to happen this week, it's like, it's not going to happen. And it's egg on our face.
Right.
That idea of domain creep is not only in education, but I see it in corporate as well. My current onboarding practice, I'm doing the work of a lot of other people that should have already been done. Sometimes it's going as far as making sure that their Active Directory account has been created. Well, I'm a field services tech out there deploying a machine. Why am I suddenly responsible for making sure that that AD account is created, that they have access to the VPN with a proper secure token? So that idea of domain creep is something to keep aware of as you're building your checklists.
So there's a question. As IT folks in here, how many times have you had to deal with from some other department? Can you just handle that for us? Yeah.
Most of the hands
pretty much
went up.
nodding or hand raises, nervous chuckles. Yes. Yeah, because it happens all the time. We tend to be the people that end up collecting all those odd jobs, and we have to account for them. Now, if HR says, hey, can you do X? And you go, okay, I can do that, because maybe it's something inconsequential, or what you think is inconsequential. What happens if it gets missed or misunderstood or whatever it is? Who does it actually blow back on? That's the other part of it. It's your job forever. You go, sure, I can help out. Well, guess what? You stepped in. And that's what happened. Okay. So moving on a little bit.
We have a hand
No,
over here.
okay.
Yep.
So we actually end up, we're a satellite research laboratory at our university. And so we have our own IT because we're big enough for that, but we also have campus IT. And to the point of where the blame falls there, because we don't have control of the checklist on the campus portion of what we do, we're the front line, and we have to take the heat when there's a problem from there, as well as the HR checklists and all that.
Right. So does that sound familiar to other folks here? Right. So what's the solution for that? Communication. Setting expectations. And sometimes.
I mean, I'd say framing it in such a way that your goals are also the organization's goals.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to get better buy-in.
Let's get that on the microphone. It's coming your way.
I was saying that you can always I try to get better buy-in by making sure that by framing my goals and pointing out how they align with the larger goals of our, in this case it's a nonprofit school, but there's like 4 tenets and stuff. This is really good. This is for inclusivity. This is for equity. This is for I forget the other ones because it's not a pop quiz. But that's the way that I spin it. It's like, hey, this is good for me, but it's great for us.
Yeah. So we're now starting to get a little bit more. I think I missed something good there. I'll see it on the video. And I can't look at myself in the video. It's bad enough you guys are probably looking at me. So, all right, the approach. How do we do this? What do we do? This is where you start taking notes if necessary. You don't have to. You can always look at this again. But when you're looking at the pieces of the technical onboarding, how do you determine what those pieces are? There are certain things that are pretty clear. They're going to need a device. What kind of device, though? What's the budget for the device? Whose budget is that coming out of? Now, you may or may not actually have a responsibility for that. You may be told that, but we need to know that, right? Ultimately, though, all of the technology needs to do what? Why do people get technology? Productivity.
They can't get their jobs done without it.
Get their job done.
Yeah.
It's not because people like really cool, shiny computers. Well, they like that too.
Yes, they do.
Let's not fool ourselves. But sometimes, so all right, this just makes me think. How many people work in an organization where you give your users a choice of platform?
Oh,
That is
so it's
fantastic,
about
and I
25,
hope next time
about
we do this,
25.
it's even more. How many people, or how many organizations here, just not that you give them a choice of platform, but maybe even a choice within a platform?
Yeah,
A
about
couple.
10, about
So
10.
I'm curious, what kind of choice do you give them? Because I just thought of that question as when, what's an example of a choice? And I'll
You'll
call it
repeat
back
it.
out.
Yeah, repeat it.
So they can choose whether it's a laptop or a desktop. Now, partially, they might need one or the other, but assuming that they're being given a choice, then it's a choice. It's a possible choice. If somebody's on the road all the time, obviously they're not going to get a desktop, or that'd be really inconvenient. And
Be the guy
actually, I was
carry-
saying Charles Edge is supposed to be presenting, and he's got a computer museum now,
Yeah.
and I've got some cool stuff, including an Apple Portable and an Osborne One. And when you look at those might as well be desktops.
Right.
So, yeah, even though they're called portables. Okay. Luggables.
Yeah.
I guess people had really much bigger arms back then. So, when you give somebody their choice, the assumption there is they can do their job with whatever the choice is. Because if the functionality is different one to the other, and they need a certain functionality, while they may prefer one platform, but they can't get that functionality in their chosen platform, they may be forced into the other side. May or may not be happy about that. Maybe that's something you go, well, maybe we can provide them the functionality, maybe we need to change our solution stack, whatever. But in general, if you're giving them, well, I was going to make a statement, but let me ask a question. For those organizations that give your users a choice, say Mac versus PC, roughly how many people choose one platform versus the other from percentage standpoint?
So of the places that are mixed platforms, we're looking for ratios, I think.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
How many Windows machines do you have? How many Mac machines do you have?
right. If it's the user's
And
choice.
And we'll just repeat.
70% Mac.
So about 90% PC, but the Mac is also limited. It requires justification.
Okay. He said 90% PC and Macs are a limited choice, but it is an option. Which, FYI, that's what my corporation is right now.
Okay. Anybody else? 80% Mac.
90, like you said, 90+% PC, but you have to also justify why you need the Mac.
Okay.
So we have to also say, are you a Mac owner or you're a Mac user? Some people own it and then say, okay, what I need to do is go into the terminal. What's that?
So he said
Okay.
he said 95% PC. Macs require a justification or a business use case.
Justin.
Yeah.
Isn't it about the split though? I'm more interested in why
Okay,
All right,
so that
I actually want that on the microphone. So can you repeat it? It's coming your way.
that's a good question, and probably we could do a whole session on that. But it is a good thing we should probably touch on.
So the question is, why is it of the two people who talked about having a split, why both of them ended it with, it's XPC, X Max, but those Max have to be justified.
All right, so why do they need to be justified?
So in our case, we're a small support group, so we have limited resources. We have a lot more experience managing the PCs, and we've also moved into a more Windows-centric environment in terms of Office 365 and cloud and so on. So the Macs require a little more attention from that side. So from that standpoint, it really requires that it be somebody, in creative or advanced scientific applications to use Macs.
Okay, and that was a good catch.
As I said before, it's a matter of, have you ever used one before? Because a lot of people, it's like, hey, I got a shiny new Mac, everyone's getting it. Oh, the Apple Watch, they got this. But then as soon as you open it up and you put it in front of them, like, okay, I see Google, I see, okay, what's this thing over here? It looks like a compass. What is that? It's called Safari. Put it down, I'll get you a PC.
Right.
So in your case, what you're saying is you may end up actually having to provide extra support because somebody wants something shiny and new because they think it's cool.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that was one of the things that I was going to get at is in some cases, people just want the thing that they think is cooler. And from an IT standpoint, because a lot of times we tend to think very rationally. Well, they can do their job, this, that, the other thing. We tend to think, because we have to, a lot of times, we have to just think, boom, 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 boom. But if you give somebody something that they enjoy having, they may end up being happier, less likely to give you a call, be more productive, and it may not be immediately. And when they're talking about their company, somebody goes, oh, how do you like, you've been there for 3 months. How do you like this company? Oh, it's great and whatever. And look at the stuff that they gave me. Because there's an actual human piece to this. There could be advantage. Now, I don't intend this to be a platform choice conversation, but it does fit into what we do. And you can't ignore that aspect of it. If they can do their job on any kind of device, give them the device they want to be doing that job on.
We recently had an executive leave, maybe, 8 months or so ago, and she went to a large shoe company. Let's leave it at that. And the feedback that was given to me and to some of the people around me was that the shoe company's onboarding experience was way, way, way better than the onboarding experience I've been able to deliver so far with the tools that I have in hand. And I took that a little personally. And so what have I been spending the past 8 months doing? Revamping our onboarding experience and making it better and putting the tools in place and putting the support in place so that those users who want a Mac have the training available for them to learn how to use the Mac and thereby be more productive.
Right.
So
a lot of these decisions have to be driven by, well, what we just talked about is if we can give the person a choice, great. But ultimately, they have to be productive for the organization, whether that's enterprise, education, government, healthcare, whatever that is. That's really, they're there to do work. And of course, my mind went to, well, some people don't really work, but that's another story. So somebody has to make the decision, what are we doing from our tech stack to support the goals of the organization? Who's making that decision in your environment? Is that you? Is it HR? Is it management? Is it a group of people? Give me some examples of how it works in your place. Who's making that decision? He even has the
Catch box.
excellent.
Yeah, I was going to comment earlier, but it's not relevant anymore.
sorry.
It's collaborative. It's collaborative between the tech department and the department head for whatever that department may be, whether that's HR, education, whoever it is. I think the supervisors in that area are the best equipped to speak to that.
Okay,
So
so
how many of you have an end user services department or similar? No, end user services where that's a group that only supports just the workers. Okay, a handful.
okay, so how many people here would say that they are the primary source of authority when it comes to the tech stack?
Okay, about 10.
So-
about 10.
So what's interesting to me is I expected the education crowd to be have some more hands, but let me adjust that question. It might change the impact. How many people here, your tech department has the responsibility for determining what the tech stack is? Okay, that's probably a little bit more than what that's more of what I expected. So, do you have input in education from maybe the educational technology people or your boards or whoever it is, kind of giving you some direction on that? I get some nods, I get some no's, so it's going to be kind of, it's all over the board is kind of what I'm seeing. Now, what about for those folks who are in enterprise? And in enterprise, I'll include things like healthcare, maybe even government, because you kind of have the layers in there. From an IT onboarding standpoint, how many people's groups are the people determining what it is in its entirety? 1, 2, 3, a handful. How many people here work for organizations that you're getting input from, say, HR, the department heads, maybe some other group that I'm not thinking of? Interesting. Oh, okay, a few. All right, that's better.
So what I did when I started at my current job is I actually purposely asked to go sit in the seat of a person in the service desk, help desk, for a couple of weeks so I could learn what the common issues were on the Windows side. And then I actually then said, now I want to sit for a while in the field services role where I'm doing provisioning, working with the end user to push the machines out. And having that hands-on experience then allowed me to craft a plan for building support for Macs at the company. And so the whole point of this is, the question is, how many of you find yourself in that role where you have to sit in the person's seat to understand fully what checklist to build, what onboarding process to build? Have you ever been in that kind of situation before? Yeah, about a dozen or so.
All right, so I was just thinking about a situation that I ran into earlier. I'm going to move over in 1 second. The company that a friend of mine worked at, he basically was employee number 1, working out of some guy's garage, packing boxes for this company. They turned into a $100 million a year company, and he got fired, but that's another story. Not his fault, just they were done with him. Not much loyalty there. But he was in charge of their print publishing side. And they were a PC shop when I first met this guy. And did it work? Kind of. But he always kind of wanted to go with Macs. Long story short, he finally was given permission to go with Macs. Now, granted, this isn't necessarily directly onboarding, but it goes towards who's making decisions. So I heard they're getting Macs. As it was, they were getting Mac Minis, which I was kind of like, okay, because this is a print publishing group. They're working with Photoshop. They're working with page layout. So I thought it was a little strange, but okay, good. And my buddy goes, listen, the IT guy can't figure something out. Would you be willing to go take a look at this? Sure. So I walk in. I sit down at his desk, and it's just like deadly slow. And this is back in Intel days. And clickety, click, click, click. This thing's got 4 gigs of RAM. And it was like the smallest hard drive, spinny hard drive, you could possibly put in the thing. Because somebody decided that what they really needed was too expensive, but they just want Mac, so this is what they're going to get. They couldn't do their jobs because the wrong person made the choice. So these are things that you need to really take in consideration, and this is where the IT group didn't make the choice, the users didn't make the choice,
Right.
It was the financial people who made the choice. That was the wrong group. So these are things that you need to look out for, is that, okay, somebody made the choice. Were they really the right people? So even if you're not making the choice, you may need to vet the choices. All right, so now processes. This is where success or failure, or at least making your own life harder, can come about if you don't really look at your kind of workflow. Where does the process start?
The checklist.
Nope. I will. Very close.
Repeat what he said.
He said the hiring process. And I'll say that is correct. Not that the checklist is wrong. We just haven't gotten there yet. Checklist is incredibly important. But how do we know to onboard somebody? Yeah, they get hired. But how does the process go in your organization to let you know that you need to start doing your job?
Mm-hmm.
At our organization, we ask the hiring manager to fill out a technology need form.
Okay, so the hiring, I'm just going to repeat it so we have to keep throwing things. So the hiring manager fills out a request form that has certain information on there that helps you. Is that a...
And that way they're making the decision, and they are supplying it on time frame, and we, all the fields in it are required, and they can't submit it unless they actually fill it all out. And we make sure that they are asking questions about actionable information.
Okay, so they have a form. All the fields have to be filled out before it can even be submitted. So that way, now who wrote your form?
I did.
You wrote your form, so you know what you want. So they have to provide you what you want. Let me ask a follow-up question to that. How many times has somebody shown up and the hiring manager went, oh yeah, I was supposed to fill that form out for you?
Yep.
5%, but it has happened. Okay, but that's great.
And so a number of you have been in a situation where you're suddenly asked to set up a computer for an employee you didn't know about.
Yeah.
That's happened to me several times.
Yeah.
Can you have it done in an hour?
Right?
It depends. Are you going to run to the Apple store for me?
Yeah,
You
can you,
know?
can you have it ready in an hour?
Steve
Yeah.
said, can you have it done in an hour? You know? Bill.
The thing that I find that's very interesting with that is who is authoritative when it comes to people that are actually hired.
So
Like, our process is so disjointed and just doesn't work. It's like, you might hear for us in schools, we might hear from the department chair that, oh, we just hired this person. But then you call the head of school's office, because we're an independent school, you call the superintendent's office, and we're like, what about this person? Like, yeah, we don't have anything for them yet. But
Right.
we want to get that, so it's like, we've come around to say, unless it's in this system, they're not there.
right.
I don't care.
So what Bill said is, who's the authoritative source on hiring? Is what it comes down to. And that's where we say, let's start to analyze the process and figure out where those breaks are. And that's part of your checklist building. And that's part of your onboarding process building.
Right.
Figure out where the holes are and patch them. And start to figure out who your allies are in the company or the organization.
Yeah.
Who can you go to who will be responsive and help you solve the problem?
Okay, so now let's say we know somebody is coming on board. Somebody is going to work with us. That's great. Now we can start with our checklist. And our checklist may be just the technical portion. There may be an HR portion. There may be a benefits portion. There may be these other things. There may be within their own group that they're going to work with. Maybe there's something there. But we're talking about the tech stuff. And that's the responsibility that we have. Checklists are great. We also have to know where everything's coming from, how long it takes for this process to occur, because maybe we need to get new hardware because we have a standard hardware set. Maybe we have a couple of those devices sitting on the shelf and we can just pull them off the shelf. Or maybe we need to order them. Now, 2 years ago, if you needed to order a custom configuration computer, how long did it take?
Yeah, months.
The answer is, I don't know. Could get it tomorrow. May not see it until the next rev of the hardware comes out. And these are things that we need to always keep in mind. There are certain things that maybe we already have something in place, but we need to buy more licenses. What's the process for that? I know in certain corporate situations, trying to get a new purchase approved might take a year and still not happen yet. That is inconvenient. So all these things, when you're planning out your process, great, you've got your checklist, but you also need to have your schedule. I need to have at least 72 hours. I need to have at least 72 days to achieve what the company, the organization, the school has said this is what needs to happen. And is that something that has to be a hard and fast rule? I would love that to be true. The reality, though, is chances are there's going to be somebody who's going to look at you after you told them, I know you hired this person. I know that they're going to be starting in 3 days, but there is no way that I can get them all their hardware and get them set up and everything I need, at least whatever. They're going to look at you and go, you got 3 days.
For those of you who have checklists already built and an onboarding process already built, I'd like to hear quickly a story from a couple of you about how COVID interrupted that checklist or that onboarding process. I have some stories, but I'd love to hear one or two of you talk about what happened to your order of operations, your checklist, your onboarding procedure.
So we had, prior to the pandemic, we were setting up all of the machines in the office when people, onboarded, and it was also partly a function of the company network having no direct route to the internet, no forward DNS lookups, and everything through a proxy. COVID turned all of that upside down. Everybody had to go home. They started using VPN, and we had to spin up a complete remote deployment process with some semblance of automated device enrollment pretty quickly. And we worked with our vendor, a value-added reseller, to develop that process and put together a form for the end users to give them step-by-step instructions on what to do when they open the box. The only thing they ended up doing was opening the Mac, putting a sticker on it with the asset tag, and closing it back up. We bristle at that slightly, but I know how that's kind of necessary in some places. But then they would ship it to the user, and they were able to get up and running. The only thing they needed to call in for was their first username and password if their manager forgot to email it to them.
So you went from a non-zero, fully, almost a white glove approach of setting up to a zero-touch approach.
Yeah.
Or close to zero touch.
As close to zero touch as we could get, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sorry.
Not this time. Sorry, Justin.
Careful, he's a big dude,
Anybody else? Okay. The reason I bring that idea up is that you should be building your checklist and your order of operations and your onboarding process to be as flexible as possible, because you don't know what the next thing is going to be that interrupts your process. Maybe your company has massive layoffs and suddenly you're working with half the number of people you used to have. Maybe your organization hires new people that have to be trained quickly. If you have a flexible onboarding process and order of operations, you can move things around and make it work to your current situation.
Okay. So one of the things, I meant to put a slide in for this. I forgot to put a slide in for this. So let me mention it just so it doesn't get lost. How many people here have an official offboarding process? Kind of. So that's good.
It's about a third of the room.
Okay. So you have a process by which you can recover the hardware, you can recover your licenses, recover your data. So that's really good, because that is just as important as an onboarding process, because you don't want your stuff out in the world. So, okay, I'm glad to see it. We talk about that later. I just wanted to mention that before I forgot anything else.
I want to talk about direct training for a minute.
Yeah.
We're still doing a fair bit of direct training at my corporation for the Mac users. Windows users, they've been able to develop a documentation that's pretty complete. And I'm working to replicate that on the Mac side. But we still do a fair bit of, it's white glove handholding. Walking the end user through configuring their VPN and configuring the secure token and getting onto our network. Once I have some more technology pieces in place, it'll become much more zero touch, and a lot of that will be automatically configured. But as you said earlier, it's taking a year for some things to get approved and purchased and passed through change management. So it is a process.
So zero touch. I actually did a presentation, I think last year before, one of the campfire things here about zero touch, when it exists, when it doesn't exist. Does anybody here truly have a zero touch process? So
one hand.
Yeah, one hand. Now, I would like to hear about it, but here's the question that I have. In an onboarding situation, as opposed to just distributing new hardware because you're doing a rev or something like that, is zero touch actually a good idea? Or are there other things that need to happen with a user that maybe zero touch isn't a real good idea? Now, granted, if you have a user that's on the other side of the world and you're just shipping them their hardware because they're in an office in Singapore or they're traveling or whatever it is, or they're just a remote user, they don't even have an office, you ship them their stuff. Yeah, the concept of zero touch is a wonderful thing because now they get their hardware, it's shrink wrapped, it's the whole Apple, this thing's great, you never need to touch it, or any one of your MDM providers. I don't believe that zero touch truly exists. But in the case of onboarding, I don't think zero touch for the onboarding is the right thing. I think that the person needs to get some face-to-face training, even if that's through a Zoom or a phone call or something like that. There should be a human on the other end, however that communication happens, to walk them through the process. Hey, you got your computer, you got your phone, you got an extra charge. Oh, you didn't get the extra charger? Oh, you should have an extra charger. Let's get you that extra charger. Oh, I thought I was going to have to haul this thing all over the place. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So this is the great opportunity to connect with the user, to give them that little bit of boost. Because remember, we talked earlier about these are humans. That sometimes they like a little extra help to know that there's somebody there for them.
Well,
Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that. So if you have perfected a zero touch or near zero touch, but what about the user who doesn't want that? And so we talk about choice of platform. What about a choice of training, a choice of how you're onboarded?
Right.
And so if we don't provide that, it may be because you have limited resources, but now you're still not giving the user their desired training method or whatever it is to get on board.
Yeah, and once again, these people aren't us. We think it is just absolutely cool as can be when we flip open a lid on a new Mac and it asks you what the language is, connect to a network, and then says, oh, you're being managed by enter organization name. And we watch it do its magic. That is cool. They don't care. They want to do their job. They don't even necessarily understand what they're looking at. Matter of fact, they may give you the call to go, somebody's into my computer.
Yep. I powered the computer off because I thought it was being hacked, and all it was your setup tool.
How many people have gotten a phone call that started with, I've been hacked?
Yeah. Yeah. The entire room hand went up, yeah.
So how do we prevent that? I'll be right. Yeah.
I was going to say, you do that with the personal setup. You sit down with the person, and what I was going to say originally is that it's not just for the user's benefit, it's for our benefit as well. I use that time to set the proper expectations about, hey, if you have a problem, don't stop me in the hall, don't send me an email, fill out a help desk ticket.
Okay.
Put a name to a face. I'm the guy that you need to come talk to if you so I use that time to really connect with the person
Mhm.
and have them feel comfortable coming to me. Because a lot of people, especially
Ah.
people who have maybe a little bit older, are not very comfortable
Yeah.
being talked to by a younger person about like, oh, well, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. So that is an incredibly important thing. So what he was saying is, take the opportunity to ensure a face-to-face. That gives you the opportunity for them to, one, see a face, to learn, to feel comfortable, to set an expectation, and that is really important and critical.
Resource dependent though.
It is resource dependent. And I don't think any of us in this room will go, I got plenty of extra time in the day.
Yeah.
Anybody here feel that they've got plenty of extra time in the day?
Yeah, no hands.
Well, you wouldn't admit it anyway, so talk to me afterwards. So we'll keep it private. Okay,
So even as I work towards zero touch at my corporation, it's about 65,000 employees. Even as I move toward that, I've been told flat out already by our executive support team that they will not do zero touch. So for all of the C-level and SLT members, they're going to get that white glove hands-on experience every single time, regardless of whatever tools I put in place. And so that's a consideration I have to look at when I'm building my documentation, when I'm making choices about which tools I use for onboarding. The executive support team has flat out said, no, we're not going to ever go that route. We will sit there next to the end user or do it for them and then hand it to the user, to the executive.
I think zero touch, the tools that allow zero touch, are great for our efficiency as IT people to do our job, to make sure the devices are ready to go, set up, configured, managed the way that we need it to be. That is our advantage. That is not necessarily the user's advantage. That is our advantage. And I think we need to remember that. We could just make it easier, quicker, so we could spend maybe a little bit more time with them explaining what they need. So the other important part, how many people here have kind of a follow-up process in place for your users, not just your help desk? What do you do? That's good. Here, toss this back to them because we're going to get some.
As part of our onboarding, we schedule a time both with my team,
Yes.
Who actually sets up the hardware, and then with the CISO, so that we can work with them to resolve any issues that they encountered, because we are 99% remote, so we
Okay.
can't physically be there. And then we, as this gentleman back here mentioned, we set the expectation that says, this is how you get to these resources. Have you ever used a Mac? You haven't? Okay, then this is a rundown of how we do that. And then we provide all the documentation that will be necessary from the jump, as well as information on how to get a hold of us in case something goes sideways on them. And then after that, CISO steps in, puts a little bit of fear of God into them to make sure they don't go too rogue. And all the way across the board, it's worked pretty well for us.
So it's interesting
Okay.
you bring up the point about a CISO. Our CISO is a Mac user,
Hold on to that for a second.
which is kind of interesting.
We're all Macs, so ours is too.
Yeah.
There
Our
you go.
CISO is a Mac user, and I make it a point when I do my onboarding with users to talk about why we use the tools we use on the machine. You know, why do we have Zscaler running? Why do we have proxies in place? Why do we block and monitor all the block some traffic and monitor all the traffic coming to and from a laptop? So I have that conversation with them, so the CISO doesn't have to, while that employee is being exited out the building.
Yeah.
So
So I think it's important that you have a process in place that after the fact, and as I said, not just your support desk, although maybe your support desk is part of this, is that the user has an understanding of what support they have available to them. Make that absolutely clear to them that after you're finished your Zoom call, your face-to-face, your voice call, whatever it is, that they know where to go to get the next level of support, because there's a pretty good chance that within a short period of time, they're going to have additional questions, not just I can't get my email, but things related to this is all new to me. So you'll want to have that in place, and you'll want to have a feedback process that you learn from what those requests were to maybe minimize those requests in the future. and that goes for all aspects of the onboarding, is that, you know what, within 2 weeks, we seem to get a lot of calls, emails, ticket submissions on this topic or that topic. Maybe we need to pay attention to that and make sure that doesn't happen. Or we know that it's going to happen and say, 2 weeks after this date, we're going to meet again. Once again, with your copious spare time. I get it. I get it. Okay.
So while the presentation of this topic, the title of this topic is Tech Onboarding.
Yeah.
It did not go.
It's a little
There we
sticky.
go. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that might be non-tech related, just because I think it's worth bringing up. Because sometimes these things are not considered in your new employee onboarding process. Things like, whose responsibility is it for a user to do get X, Y, or Z set, right? Does that user know how to find their way from one building to another? Are the wayfaring instructions, are there good enough wayfaring signs to help that user find their way? Have you shown them how to find the maps to the buildings, which are published on our intranet? Do you know personally where the nearest gender neutral bathroom is in each building? If you're doing onboarding with that user, that new employee, you might want to know where those are, because you don't know when the next employee comes in if they need that requirement or not. Who do you reach out to if you have questions? Where are your allies? Who could possibly answer these questions for you if you don't know them? I actually spent a whole bunch of time studying on my org chart to figure out who's responsible for this and this and this and this, and then I actually mapped it out and wrote it down, so I didn't have to go back to the org chart and look it up every single time. Who's responsible for cybersecurity? Who's responsible for, Azure AD account creation? Who's responsible for the deployment of VPN and managing our VPN solution? Does your employee require any type of special ergonomic accommodations? I can tell you a story. When I was working at a school, I had a new employee who was coming on, and I just, for whatever reason, I ended up not meeting this employee until he was already there, and it was time to onboard him. But I had heard from other people who had met him that he had a disability, and he was born without hands. He had one hand with basically a thumb on it, and that was his only appendage. And I thought, how am I going to onboard this employee if he can't type? So I went to the head of the school and I said, hey, Dave, I don't know what to do here. I haven't met this guy yet for whatever reason, but I'm being asked to help him set up his computer. What do I need to know? Can he type? Do I need to spend time learning how to use dictation software to help him use it? I didn't know. And it ended up not being a big deal. Turned out he was incredibly he could use the computer without a problem. But I didn't know. I didn't have that knowledge. I hadn't met him. I think if I had met him beforehand, it wouldn't have been an issue at all. But I was sitting there the night before going, what do I do? I'm suddenly being put in this situation that I don't have any answers. So I went to find the answers, and it ended up not being a big deal.
When you meet them beforehand, what does that look like? Because once we see the employee, they're hired.
Yeah, so this was at a school, and it was a new employee coming in, so there was some flexibility time there. This person had come in and had done tours and met a bunch of people. I just, trips in the night, right? Just passed, but ended up not meeting them. That's a great question. He said, what if you don't have that time? What do you do? Well, go back to who to contact with questions, right? Find out who you can reach out to. If you're a big enough company, you probably have people in HR that can answer those questions for you. Where's the cafeteria? How do I get there? My first day of work, I didn't know where the drinking fountains were. I sat there in my cubicle for 5 or 6 hours. I'm like, I don't know where anything is because nobody showed me.
Yeah, but it was also the hazing.
It was also COVID.
They didn't tell you where the bathrooms were either.
Yeah, it was also COVID, and there was nobody in the building. But yeah, where are the refrigerators? Where are the office supplies? If you know these things, you should share them with new employees.
So one of the things that I'm thinking while Damien's talking about this is, why does this fall on us? Well, because often we're the people who know like everything, because we don't work in just like one little section of the building. We may be across the building. We know all these things, and we're hopefully friendly faces to these folks. Be friendly faces to your users. It will only benefit you. They will like us a lot better. So one thing I'm thinking here, we've got 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
And
we're going to rip right through these and then we'll do Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my viewpoint is zero touch doesn't actually exist, but it's a good thing to try to get to because it makes things more efficient for us. Yep. But at the same time, we really have to understand what that looks like to the user.
So we've actually talked quite a bit about zero touch already. It's just a summary slide. Welcome to check it out later on. We were hoping to have a lot more time for story sharing, but we'll just keep right on going because I wanted to quickly
buy us beers. We'll talk all night.
I wanted to quickly talk about some of the solutions that are out there, and these are just, I'm not going into depth, but these are a few of the solutions out there to help you with your tech onboarding. Dep Notify has been out there for a while. It's a little bit deprecated now. It's still functional, but the developer's not really updating it anymore. Still usable. I would encourage you to look at Dan Snelson's Set Up Your Mac. It uses Swift Dialog as its for its interface. It's a tool that can help you get that software provisioned onto the machine and the configuration set up. And this is Jamf. It's not Jamf specific, but it's built to be used with Jamf. Baseline is a solution that also uses Swift Dialog, but it is meant to be MDM agnostic. So if you're using another MDM, take a look at Baseline, also open source, also free. And there is, you said your remote worked.
There we go.
There is a professional paid solution called Octary as well. Same kind of idea. So if you're looking for something with a support contract, I know sometimes that's a requirement, take a look at Octary from Amaris. Okay. All right.
All right.
Q&A, we got 3 minutes. Comments even.
Yeah, because comments are just
Where's the catch box? I have no idea. Comments,
catch box has
questions.
been caught.
Comments, questions.
So I guess due to lack of questions and comments, we have now taught you everything you could possibly want to know about onboarding. So I think this has been fantastic. There are a lot of variables, and that's what we really want you to think about. I do want to point out we do have the feedback. Please give it to us. That's how we learn. This is the first time that I'm doing this presentation. It's the first time I'm doing the presentation with Damien, and we need to learn.
Just one quick question, Damien, if you could go over just a little bit kind of high level what your onboarding looks like.
Yep. So he asked Damien, what does your current onboarding look like? Right now, it is an S show. It is not pleasant. And it's, as I said, kind of alluded to, I'm missing some tools. And those tools are currently stuck in change management, waiting for them to come out so I can deploy them.
And if you come to has a tool that's been waiting a full year.
If you come to my presentation on Friday, I'll be talking all about this. As I've moved from education to enterprise, and I'm speaking about the differences between managing Macs in education versus enterprise on Friday. And I'll be talking a lot about the change management process and the software asset management process and all of the hurdles that you have to overcome. So it's currently a lot of manual, a lot of hand-holding. I'll build a machine out. I will then go and sit with an end user for sometimes upwards of an hour, helping them get everything configured. It's almost a white glove approach. It's functional, it works, they love it. It's not scalable at all. And so my holy grail, despite Ben's misgivings, is as zero touch as I can make it.
I always said it is a thing to aim towards, but I don't think that it's 100% possible. Yeah. Like I said, buy us beers, wax poetic about it for hours. Yeah. Bill.
It's very loudly. I think it's very interesting when people talk about enterprise and then they talk about education. And they talk about them as almost like two very separate things. And I look at the number of devices that we manage. I know there's different considerations in each. But if you want to look at onboarding, come and look at what it's like to onboard fourth graders.
Yeah, or kindergartners. Yeah.
Fourth grade is like onboarding teachers, which
Right.
The base level that you have to build for.
So what Bill is stating, and actually buried in a slide somewhere, there was going to be discussion of that, is there is a huge, when you're talking about onboardings of an adult, that's one thing, probably similar across the board. When it's a child,
It's our time.
that's a whole nother
All
story.
right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.